The bright lights of the community center felt overwhelming as 8-year-old Alex sat in the back corner, trying to make himself as small as possible. His legs dangled from the chair, his scuffed sneakers barely touching the carpeted floor. The annual charity dinner was in full swing around him, with fancy-dressed people holding wine glasses and talking in voices that seemed too loud and too confident. Alex pulled his worn jacket tighter around his thin frame and wished he could disappear into the wall behind him. He didn't want to be here. He never wanted to be at these events where grown-ups looked at him and the other kids from the children's home with those sad, pitying expressions. It made his stomach twist in knots. Mrs. Johnson, the director of Bright Hope Children's Home, had insisted that some of the kids come tonight. "It's important for the community to see who they're helping," she had explained gently. But Alex knew what that really meant. They were there to be looked at, to make people feel good about opening their wallets. He hated it. The dining hall buzzed with conversation about golf games, vacation plans, and business deals. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables covered in white cloth and fancy silverware. Alex had never seen so many forks at one place setting. He touched the single fork next to his plate and wondered why anyone would need more than one. At the head table, a tall man in an expensive suit was speaking into a microphone about the importance of giving back to the community. Alex wasn't really listening. Instead, he was watching a small spider making its way across the ceiling, spinning an invisible web between the light fixtures. He envied that spider. It could go anywhere it wanted, build its home wherever it pleased. "Alex, this is Mr. Peterson." Mrs. Johnson's voice suddenly broke through his daydreaming. Alex looked up to see a man with kind gray eyes and a gentle smile standing beside their table. Unlike the other adults who had stopped by earlier with their forced cheerfulness, this man seemed different. He wasn't wearing the fake smile that adults usually put on when they talk to orphans. Mr. Peterson slowly lowered himself until he was at Alex's eye level, balancing on one knee beside the chair. "Hello there," he said softly. "I hope you're enjoying the dinner." Alex shrugged, not sure what to say. The chicken had been okay, he supposed, though he was still hungry. There never seemed to be quite enough food at these fancy events, despite all the plates and silverware. "Mrs. Johnson tells me you're quite the storyteller," Mr. Peterson continued, his voice warm and genuine. "She says you write amazing stories that make everyone want to keep listening." Alex felt his cheeks grow warm. He did love to write, spending hours in his small room at the children's home filling notebook after notebook with stories about brave kids going on adventures, finding treasure, and most importantly, finding families who loved them forever. But he had never thought anyone important would care about his silly stories. "I write a little bit," Alex mumbled, looking down at his hands folded in his lap. "A little bit?" Mrs. Johnson laughed softly. "Alex, show him the notebook you brought." Reluctantly, Alex reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, battered composition book. The cover was worn smooth from being handled so much, and the corners were bent from being stuffed into pockets and backpacks. He held it protectively against his chest. Mr. Peterson's eyes lit up when he saw it. "Is that where you keep your stories?" Alex nodded slowly. "My grandma gave it to me before she—" He stopped, the words catching in his throat like they always did when he tried to talk about her. "Before she passed away?" Mr. Peterson asked gently. Alex nodded again, blinking back the tears that always came when he thought about Grandma Rose. She had been the only family he had left, and when she got sick, everything changed. The small apartment they shared, the Sunday morning pancakes, the bedtime stories, all of it was gone now. "She sounds like she was very special," Mr. Peterson said, "and I bet she would be so proud of the writer you've become." Something about the way he said it made Alex look up. There was no pity in Mr. Peterson's voice, no fake sympathy, just honest kindness, the kind Grandma Rose used to show him. "Would you be willing to share one of your stories with everyone here tonight?" Mr. Peterson asked. "I think these people need to hear what you have to say. I think your words might help them understand something important." Alex's heart started pounding so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. Speaking in front of all these fancy people? He looked around the room at the hundreds of faces, all strangers who probably wouldn't care about anything a kid like him had to say. "I don't know," Alex whispered. What if they don't like it? What if I mess up? Mr. Peterson smiled, and Alex noticed tiny wrinkles around his eyes that appeared when he did. You know what? The best stories come from the heart, and I have a feeling your heart has some pretty important things to say. Alex glanced over at Mrs. Johnson, who gave him an encouraging nod. Then he looked at the other kids from the home sitting at nearby tables. They were all watching him with curious expressions, probably wondering what the fancy man wanted with him. What would I talk about? Alex asked, his voice barely audible over the dinner conversation around them. Whatever feels right to you, Mr. Peterson said. Maybe you could tell them about what it's like to be a kid who writes stories. Or maybe about what home means to you. Or anything else that's in your heart. Alex clutched his notebook tighter. Inside its pages were dozens of stories about kids who found their way home, about families who stayed together no matter what, about love that lasted forever. Maybe, just maybe, these stories could help other people understand what it felt like to be him. The room seemed to spin a little as Alex considered the possibility. His mouth felt dry and his palms were getting sweaty. But somewhere deep inside, he could almost hear Grandma Rose's voice telling him to be brave, telling him that his words mattered. Okay, Alex whispered, so quietly that Mr. Peterson had to lean closer to hear him. Okay, I'll try. Mr. Peterson's smile grew wider, reaching all the way to his eyes. Wonderful. Take your time. And remember, everyone here wants to listen to what you have to say. As Mr. Peterson stood up and walked toward the front of the room to announce the next part of the evening, Alex sat frozen in his chair. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might fly right out of his chest. Around him, the dinner conversation continued, people laughing and talking as if his whole world hadn't just changed in the span of 5 minutes. Mrs. Johnson reached over and squeezed his shoulder gently. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, she said softly. But I think you might surprise yourself with how strong you are. Alex looked down at his notebook, running his fingers over the smooth cover. Inside were all his dreams, his hopes, his memories of Grandma Rose, and his honest thoughts about what it meant to be a kid waiting for someone to love him. Maybe it was time to let other people see those parts of him. Maybe it was time to be brave. As Alex walked slowly toward the stage on trembling legs, his mind drifted back to how he had ended up here. The memories came flooding back like pages from a photo album he kept hidden in his heart. 3 years ago, everything had been different. He was living in a tiny apartment with his grandmother Rose, a woman who smelled like vanilla cookies and always had Band-Aids in her purse for scraped knees. Their home wasn't fancy, just 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a living room with a couch that had seen better days. But it was theirs, and more importantly, it was filled with love. Grandma Rose worked as a cleaning lady at the local office building, leaving early in the morning and coming home tired but always ready to hear about Alex's day at school. She would kick off her worn shoes at the door and say, "Tell me everything, my little writer boy. What adventures did you have today?" Those evenings were magic. After dinner, which was usually something simple like grilled cheese sandwiches or spaghetti with butter, they would sit together on that old couch. Grandma Rose would pull out whatever library book they were reading together, and Alex would snuggle up next to her, breathing in her familiar scent of lavender soap and peppermint tea. Words are powerful things, she would tell him as they read. They can take you anywhere in the world, even places that don't exist yet. They can make people laugh when they're sad, or help them feel less alone when the world seems too big. It was Grandma Rose who first noticed that Alex loved to make up his own stories. When he was just 5 years old, he would create elaborate tales about the pigeons outside their window, giving them names and personalities and adventures. She would listen to every word, asking questions and acting like his silly bird stories were the most important things she had ever heard. For his 6th birthday, when money was especially tight, Grandma Rose saved up for 3 months to buy him a composition notebook and a pack of pencils. Every writer needs proper tools, she had said, presenting the gifts with a ceremony that made Alex feel like he was receiving royal treasures. That notebook became his most precious possession. He would write in it every day after school, creating stories about brave children who solved mysteries, found hidden treasures, and most often, discovered that they were part of wonderful families who would never let them go. The apartment was full of little traditions that made life special. Saturday mornings meant pancakes shaped like animals, which Grandma Rose would make using an old cookie cutter set she had found at a garage sale. Sunday afternoons were for visiting the library, where Alex could check out as many books as he could carry, and Grandma Rose would sit in the comfortable chairs reading magazines about gardening, even though they only had a small windowsill herb garden. But Alex's favorite tradition was their bedtime routine. Every night, after he had brushed his teeth and put on his pajamas, Grandma Rose would sit on the edge of his bed and ask him to tell her a story. Not read one from a book, but create one right there on the spot. She would give him a starting point. Tell me about a boy who finds a magic door, or what would happen if clouds could talk. And Alex would spin tales that made her laugh and gasp, and sometimes even get a little teary-eyed. "You have a gift, sweetheart," she would tell him as she tucked him in. "Your imagination is like a garden, and every story you tell makes it grow bigger and more beautiful." Life wasn't always easy in that small apartment. Sometimes the electricity got turned off when money was tight, and they would have candlelight dinners and pretend they were camping. Sometimes the heat didn't work very well in winter, and they would pile extra blankets on Alex's bed and drink hot chocolate to warm up. But somehow Grandma Rose always made these challenges feel like adventures rather than problems. When Alex was 7, things started to change. Grandma Rose began getting tired more easily, needing to sit down frequently when they walked to the store. She started coughing more often, especially at night when she thought Alex was asleep. But she always waved away his concerns with a smile and a joke about getting old. The doctor visits started slowly, just routine checkups, Grandma Rose assured him. But Alex noticed that she came home from these appointments looking worried, even when she tried to hide it. She would hug him extra tight and ask him to tell her more stories, as if his words could chase away whatever was troubling her. One evening, about 6 months before everything changed forever, Grandma Rose sat Alex down on their old couch for a serious conversation. Her hands were shaking slightly as she took his small ones in hers. "Alex, honey, I need to tell you something important," she said, her voice gentler than usual. "I'm sick, sweetheart. The doctors are going to try to help me get better, but I need you to know that no matter what happens, I love you more than all the stars in the sky." Alex didn't really understand what cancer meant at first. All he knew was that Grandma Rose had to go to the hospital more often, and she got thinner and more tired. She wore scarves to cover her head when her hair started falling out, but she still made animal-shaped pancakes on Saturday mornings, even when her hands shook so much that the elephants looked more like clouds. During those difficult months, their bedtime story tradition became even more important. On nights when Grandma Rose was too weak to sit up for long, Alex would lie next to her in her bed and tell her stories about magical places where people never got sick, where families stayed together forever, and where love was strong enough to cure anything. "Promise me something," Grandma Rose whispered to him one night when the moonlight was streaming through her bedroom window. "Promise me you'll keep writing your stories, even when I'm not here to listen to them. Your words have magic in them, Alex. They can help people feel less alone in this big, scary world," Alex had promised, not really understanding what she meant about not being there to listen. He couldn't imagine a world without Grandma Rose in it. The end came quietly on a Tuesday morning in spring. Alex woke up to find Mrs. Miller from next door in their kitchen, making phone calls with tears in her eyes. Grandma Rose had passed away peacefully in her sleep, the doctors said. She wasn't in pain anymore. The next few days were a blur of strangers in suits, social workers with clipboards, and packing boxes. Mrs. Miller tried to explain that Alex would go to a special place where other children without families lived, a place where kind people would take care of him until a new family could be found. Alex packed his few belongings in a small suitcase, but the most important thing he carried was that composition notebook. Inside its pages were all the stories he had shared with Grandma Rose, all the love and laughter and magic they had created together in their small apartment. Bright Hope Children's Home was nice enough, The staff was kind, the other children were friendly, and there were 3 meals a day and clean clothes and warm beds. But it wasn't home. Home was Grandma Rose listening to his stories. Home was Saturday morning pancakes and library visits and bedtime hugs that made everything feel safe. In his new room, which he shared with 2 other boys, Alex would write in his notebook every night before going to sleep. He wrote about Grandma Rose, about their apartment, about the love that still lived in his heart even though she was gone. And slowly, carefully, he began to write new stories about finding hope in dark places, about the families that people choose for themselves, and about the power of words to heal broken hearts. Standing behind the heavy curtain at the side of the stage, Alex could hear his heart beating so loudly that he was sure everyone in the room could hear it too. His hands were sweaty as he gripped his worn notebook, and his legs felt like they might give out at any moment. Through a small gap in the curtain, he could see hundreds of people sitting at round tables, all dressed in their finest clothes, chatting and laughing as they finished their dessert. Mr. Peterson had just finished introducing him to the crowd, but Alex barely heard the words over the rushing sound in his ears. Something about a special young man with an important message, and please give a warm welcome. The applause sounded like thunder, and Alex wondered if he might actually throw up right there behind the curtain. Mrs. Johnson appeared beside him, her kind face full of encouragement. "You don't have to do this, sweetheart," she whispered. "We can tell Mr. Peterson you're not feeling well, and everyone will understand." Alex looked down at his notebook, thinking about all the stories inside it. Stories about brave kids who faced their fears, about heroes who found strength they didn't know they had, about the magic that happened when people shared their truth with the world. Grandma Rose had always told him that his words mattered, but he had never imagined using them in front of so many strangers. "I think I want to try," Alex said quietly, surprised by his own words. Grandma Rose always said that stories are meant to be shared. Mrs. Johnson smiled and squeezed his shoulder gently. "She would be so proud of you right now." Taking a deep breath that seemed to come from his toes, Alex stepped out from behind the curtain and walked slowly across the stage. The bright lights made it hard to see the faces in the audience, which was probably a good thing because it made the crowd seem less real, less scary. The podium seemed enormous as Alex approached it. Even with the microphone adjusted to its lowest setting, he had to stand on his tiptoes to reach it properly. The feedback squeal that came through the speakers when he first leaned in made several people in the audience chuckle, and somehow that small moment of imperfection helped calm his nerves just a little bit. "Hi," Alex said into the microphone, his voice sounding strange and amplified in the large room. "My name is Alex, and I'm 8 years old." He had planned to read one of his adventure stories, the one about a boy who discovers a secret door in his closet that leads to a magical kingdom. It was exciting and fun, with dragons and talking animals and a happy ending where the boy becomes a hero. But standing there under those bright lights, looking out at all those expectant faces, that story suddenly felt wrong. These people didn't need to hear about made-up kingdoms and imaginary dragons. They needed to hear something real, something true. Alex set his notebook down on the podium, leaving it closed. "I was going to read you one of my stories," Alex began, his voice growing steadier as he spoke. "But I think instead I want to tell you about the most important person who ever lived. I want to tell you about my Grandma Rose." A hush fell over the room, different from the polite quiet that had greeted his arrival on stage. This was the kind of silence that meant people were really listening. "My grandma wasn't rich," Alex continued, finding that the words came easier when he talked from his heart instead of from a script. "She worked cleaning offices, and our apartment was really small. The couch had a rip in it that we covered with a blanket. And sometimes in winter we had to wear extra sweaters inside because the heat didn't work very good." He paused, remembering the way Grandma Rose would pile quilts on top of them during those cold nights, how she would make hot chocolate with tiny marshmallows and tell him stories about brave polar bears to make the cold seem like an adventure. "But she was the richest person I ever knew," Alex said, his voice growing stronger. "Not with money, but with love. Every morning when I woke up, she would already be in the kitchen making breakfast. and she would smile at me like I was the best thing that had ever happened to her. In the audience, Alex noticed that people had stopped fidgeting with their phones and jewelry. They were leaning forward slightly, their faces focused entirely on him. Grandma Rose taught me that home isn't about having a big house or fancy furniture. Home is about having someone who thinks you're special just because you exist. It's about someone who listens to all your stories, even the silly ones about talking pigeons, and acts like they're the most interesting things in the world. Alex's voice caught slightly as he remembered those evenings on the old couch. Grandma Rose's patient attention as he spun tale after tale about the birds outside their window. She used to say that words have magic in them, that they can take you places you've never been and help you understand things you've never thought about before. But the most magical thing about words is that they can help people feel less alone. A woman in the front row dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, and Alex realized that his own eyes were getting watery too. But he pressed on, knowing that Grandma Rose would want him to finish what he had started. When Grandma Rose got sick, I learned something really hard. I learned that sometimes the people we love the most can't stay with us forever, no matter how much we want them to. But I also learned that the love they give us, that stays forever, it lives right here, Alex said, putting his small hand over his heart. The room was completely silent now except for Alex's voice and the quiet sounds of people crying. But they weren't crying because they felt sorry for him. They were crying because they understood something important about love and loss and the connections that make us human. After Grandma Rose died, I went to live at Bright Hope Children's Home. It's a good place with nice people who take care of kids like me. But for a long time, I was angry. I was angry that Grandma Rose had to leave me. I was angry that other kids got to keep their families when I couldn't keep mine. I was angry that grown-ups would look at me with those sad faces, like I was broken somehow. Alex looked out at the audience, seeing his own reflection in their attentive faces. But I'm not broken. None of the kids at the home are broken. We're just kids who had something really sad happen to us. And we're learning how to carry that sadness while still finding reasons to smile. He thought about his friends back at Bright Hope. Quiet Lily, who drew beautiful pictures but rarely spoke. Mischievous Ben, who could make anyone laugh even on the worst days. Little Sophie, who still waited by the window every afternoon, hoping her mom would come back. We still love to play games and tell jokes and dream about what we want to be when we grow up. Lily wants to be an artist. Ben wants to fix cars. Sophie wants to be a teacher so she can help other kids learn to read. And me? I want to keep writing stories because Grandma Rose was right about words having magic. Alex picked up his notebook and held it against his chest. In here, I write about all of us. I write about kids who are brave even when they're scared. I write about families that you choose, not just the ones you're born into. I write about hope because even when really sad things happen, there's always something good waiting if you keep looking for it. The silence in the room felt different now, charged with emotion and understanding. Alex could see that his words were reaching people in a way he had never expected. I guess what I want to tell you is that when you look at kids like me, don't see us as charity cases or feel sorry for us. See us as kids with stories to tell, dreams to chase, and love to give. Because that's what Grandma Rose taught me. That everyone has something important to share with the world. And sometimes the most powerful stories come from the most unexpected places. Alex stepped back from the microphone, his heart still racing but feeling lighter somehow. For a moment, the room remained perfectly quiet, as if everyone was holding their breath. Then, like a wave breaking on the shore, the applause began. The applause that greeted Alex's words wasn't the polite clapping that usually happened at charity events. It was something deeper, more genuine, like the sound of hundreds of hearts opening at the same time. But Alex barely heard it. He was still caught up in the moment of sharing his deepest truth with a room full of strangers, feeling both exhausted and strangely energized. As the clapping died down, Alex noticed something remarkable happening in the audience. People weren't just sitting back in their chairs, satisfied that they had done their good deed for the evening. Instead, they were leaning forward, their faces showing a mixture of emotions, surprise, recognition, and something that looked like hunger for more. An elegant woman in the third row raised her hand tentatively, like a student in a classroom. Mr. Peterson, who had been standing at the side of the stage with tears in his eyes, walked over to the microphone. "It looks like our young friend has inspired some questions," he said gently to Alex. "Would you be comfortable answering a few?" Alex nodded, though his heart started beating fast again. Talking about Grandma Rose had felt natural, but answering questions from these important-looking adults seemed scary. The woman in the third row stood up slowly. "Alex, honey," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "you said that kids at the children's home aren't broken. But how do you stay so positive when such hard things have happened to you?" Alex thought for a moment, remembering all the nights he had cried into his pillow, missing Grandma Rose so much it felt like a physical ache in his chest. "I guess I don't feel positive all the time," he said honestly. "Sometimes I get really sad and sometimes I get angry. But Grandma Rose used to tell me that feelings are like weather. They change. A rainy day doesn't last forever, and neither does a sad day." He paused, looking down at his notebook. "And when I write my stories, I feel close to her again. It's like she's still with me, helping me find the right words." A man with gray hair in the back of the room stood up next. "Alex, you mentioned your friends at the children's home. Can you tell us more about them? What are they like?" Alex's face lit up for the first time since he had stepped onto the stage. "Oh, they're amazing. There's Lily. She's 10 and she draws these incredible pictures. She doesn't talk much because she's shy, but her drawings tell stories better than words sometimes. She drew a picture of a family of rabbits last week, and it was so beautiful it made Mrs. Johnson cry happy tears." The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. "And there's Ben," Alex continued, his confidence growing as he talked about his friends. "He's 9 and he can fix anything. Last month, when the old radio in our playroom stopped working, Ben took it apart and put it back together, and somehow it worked even better than before. He says, 'Broken things just need someone to understand how they work inside.'" Alex smiled, thinking about Ben's infectious laugh and his ability to turn even the most mundane day into an adventure. "Ben makes everyone laugh, even when we're having bad days. He does these silly voices and makes up jokes that don't always make sense, but they make us feel better anyway." A younger woman near the front raised her hand. "What about little Sophie that you mentioned?" "Sophie is only 5, Alex said, his voice becoming gentler. "She's been at the home for 2 years, and she still looks out the window every afternoon around 3 o'clock. That's when her mom used to pick her up from daycare before things got complicated. Mrs. Johnson says Sophie's mom loves her very much but can't take care of her right now." Alex's expression grew thoughtful. "Sophie doesn't understand all the grown-up reasons why families sometimes can't stay together. She just knows she misses her mom. But she's learning to read now, and when she sounds out new words, she gets this huge smile like she's discovered treasure. She wants to be a teacher when she grows up so she can help other kids feel smart and important." An older gentleman in an expensive suit stood up, his voice gruff with emotion. "Alex, what do you think people like us, people who have been blessed with comfortable lives, should know about children in your situation?" Alex considered this carefully. It was a big question, the kind that adults usually asked other adults. But something about the man's sincere expression made Alex want to give him a real answer. "I think," Alex said slowly, "that most people look at us and see what we don't have. No parents, no permanent home, no fancy clothes or toys. But we have a lot of things that maybe don't show on the outside." He took a deep breath, thinking about how to explain something he had never put into words before. "We have each other. When Lily has nightmares about the car accident that brought her to the home, Ben and I sit with her until she feels safe again. When Ben gets frustrated because he can't remember what his dad's voice sounded like, Lily draws him pictures of strong, kind-looking men, and Sophie tells him stories about brave fathers." The audience was so quiet that Alex could hear the air conditioning humming. Softly in the background, "We take care of each other in ways that maybe kids with regular families don't have to," Alex continued. "We share everything, our snacks, our favorite books, our secrets, our hopes. When one of us feels sad, we all feel it. But when one of us feels happy, we all feel that too." Alex looked directly at the man who had asked the question. "I guess what I want you to know is that we're not waiting around feeling sorry for ourselves. We're living our lives, making friends, learning things, dreaming about the future. We're kids first, and kids who need homes second. A woman in a beautiful dress near the middle of the room stood up, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Alex, do you ever get scared about what will happen to you? Sometimes, Alex admitted. Especially late at night when the house is really quiet. I wonder if I'll ever find a family that wants me, or if I'll age out of the system and have to figure out everything on my own. His honesty seemed to hit the audience like a physical force. Several people were crying openly now, not the polite tears of sympathy, but the deep emotion that comes from truly understanding someone else's experience. But then I remember what Grandma Rose taught me about hope, Alex said, his voice growing stronger. She said hope isn't about knowing everything will work out perfectly. Hope is about believing that tomorrow might be better than today, and that even if it's not, you'll be strong enough to handle whatever comes. Alex clutched his notebook tighter. And I have my stories. In my stories, kids like me always find families who love them. Kids like me grow up to do important things. Kids like me matter. Maybe those are just made-up stories, but they help me believe that real life can have happy endings too. Mr. Peterson stepped forward gently. Alex, I think you've shared more wisdom in the last few minutes than most adults share in a lifetime. Is there anything else you'd like to tell everyone before we finish? Alex looked out at the sea of faces, all focused on him with an intensity he had never experienced before. These weren't the pitying looks he was used to getting. These were the faces of people who saw him, really saw him, as a complete person with thoughts and feelings and dreams that mattered. I guess I just want to say thank you, Alex said. Thank you for listening to me, really listening. Most of the time, adults ask kids questions, but they don't really wait for the answers. Tonight, you made me feel like my words matter, like my story is important. That's the best gift anyone could give me. The applause that followed was unlike anything the charity dinner had ever witnessed. It started slowly with a few people clapping, then built into something thunderous and sustained. People weren't just clapping for Alex. They were clapping for every child who had ever felt invisible. Every story that had gone untold, every dream that had been dismissed as unimportant. But more than that, they were clapping because an 8-year-old boy had just taught them something profound about resilience, hope, and the power of seeing people for who they really are instead of what they appear to lack. The morning after the charity dinner, Alex woke up in his small bed at Bright Hope Children's Home feeling different somehow. The sunlight streaming through the window seemed brighter, and the usual sounds of kids getting ready for breakfast felt more hopeful. He had slept better than he had in months, despite all the excitement from the night before. Alex! Alex, wake up! Ben was shaking his shoulder gently, his eyes wide with excitement. Mrs. Johnson wants to see you in her office. She says it's important! Alex sat up, rubbing his eyes. Am I in trouble? I don't think so, Lily said quietly from her bed across the room. She looked happy when she came looking for you. Really happy, like when she gets good news about one of us. Curious and a little nervous, Alex got dressed quickly and made his way downstairs to Mrs. Johnson's office. The familiar smell of coffee and lavender air freshener greeted him as he knocked on the door. Come in, sweetheart, Mrs. Johnson called out, and when Alex peeked around the door, he saw her sitting at her desk with a huge smile on her face. Her computer was open and she was surrounded by papers and sticky notes. Alex, honey, sit down. I have some incredible news to share with you. Mrs. Johnson's voice was bubbling with excitement. Do you remember how Mr. Peterson recorded your speech last night for the local news station? Alex nodded, remembering the camera in the back of the room that he had tried not to think about while he was speaking. Well, they aired it on the morning news, and something amazing has happened. My phone has been ringing all morning. Mrs. Johnson turned her computer screen so Alex could see it. Look at this. On the screen was a video player showing Alex from the night before, standing at the podium with his notebook clutched in his small hands. Below the video were hundreds of comments, and the view counter was climbing rapidly. People are sharing your speech all over the internet, Mrs. Johnson explained, scrolling through comment after comment. Listen to some of these messages. This little boy changed my whole perspective on adoption. I never realized how wise kids in foster care could be. My family is calling our social worker today. Alex stared at the screen in amazement. He had never imagined that his words could travel beyond that room, beyond those people who had been there to hear them in person. Over the next few days, the effects of Alex's speech began to ripple outward in ways no one could have predicted. The video was shared on social media platforms. Local news stations picked up the story, and soon, Alex's honest words about life as an orphan were reaching people across the country. But more importantly, those words were inspiring action. The first family to call Bright Hope Children's Home was the Hendersons, a couple in their 40s who had been thinking about adoption for years but had never taken the first step. "We watched that little boy's speech," Mrs. Henderson told Mrs. Johnson over the phone, "and we realized we weren't just thinking about adding to our family. We were thinking about giving a child the chance to be part of something permanent and loving." Within a week, 3 more families had called to inquire about adoption, then 5 more. By the end of the month, Mrs. Johnson had received more serious adoption inquiries than she typically got in an entire year. But the changes went beyond just adoption calls. Dr. Martinez, a child psychologist who had seen the video, reached out to offer free counseling services for any child at the home who might benefit from talking to someone. "That young man's insight about emotional resilience was remarkable," she explained. "I want to help other children develop those same coping skills." Local businesses began reaching out too. Mr. Garcia, who owned a bookstore downtown, offered to start a weekly reading program at the home. "If that boy loves stories so much," he said, "then maybe other kids there do too. I want to make sure they have access to all the books they want." The most surprising development came from the high school across town. A group of teenagers had watched Alex's speech and decided to start a mentorship program. "We want to hang out with the kids at Bright Hope," explained Riley, a 17-year-old who had started organizing the effort. "Not because we feel sorry for them, but because that kid Alex made us realize they probably have a lot to teach us too." 3 weeks after the speech, Alex found himself sitting in Mrs. Johnson's office again, but this time he wasn't alone. Across from him sat Mr. Peterson and his wife Catherine, both looking nervous and excited at the same time. "Alex," Mrs. Johnson began gently, "Mr. and Mrs. Peterson would like to talk to you about something very special." Mr. Peterson cleared his throat, looking more nervous than he had at the charity dinner. "Alex, Catherine and I have been talking a lot since that night you spoke. Your words really touched our hearts, and we've been thinking about what you said about families being people who choose each other." Catherine leaned forward, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "We've wanted to be parents for a long time, but we were so focused on having a baby that we never considered that our perfect child might already be out there, waiting for us to find him." Alex's heart started beating faster as he began to understand what they were trying to tell him. "We would be honored," Mr. Peterson continued, "if you would consider letting us adopt you. We want to be your family, Alex, not because we feel sorry for you, but because we've fallen in love with the incredible, wise, brave boy you are." The room seemed to spin a little as Alex processed their words. After 3 years of waiting, of wondering if anyone would ever want him permanently, here were 2 people asking to be his family. "Would you like some time to think about it?" Catherine asked gently. "We know it's a big decision." Alex looked at Mrs. Johnson, who nodded encouragingly. Then he looked back at the Petersons, remembering how kind Mr. Peterson had been that night, how he had listened to Alex's stories like they really mattered. "Would I still be able to visit my friends here?" Alex asked quietly. "Of course," Mr. Peterson said immediately. "They're important to you, which makes them important to us too." "And could I keep writing stories?" Catherine smiled. "We were hoping you would. We'd love to hear them." Alex took a deep breath, thinking about Grandma Rose and what she would say if she were here. He imagined her voice telling him to be brave, to take chances on love, to remember that families come in all different forms. "Yes," Alex said, his voice growing stronger. "Yes, I would like that very much." But Alex's story didn't end with his own happy beginning. In the months that followed, his speech continued to inspire change in their community. Lily was adopted by Dr. Martinez, who had been so impressed by the children's resilience that she decided to expand her family. Ben went to live with Mr. Garcia and his husband. who loved his mechanical mind and his ability to make people laugh. Little Sophie found her forever home with a teacher named Ms. Wong, who understood Sophie's dream of helping other children learn. Even better, the adoption agency worked out a plan for Sophie to have supervised visits with her birth mother, who was getting the help she needed to become healthy again. The mentorship program that started at the high school spread to other schools in the district. The reading program at the bookstore became so popular that other children's homes across the state began starting their own versions. Most importantly, Alex continued to speak at events, sharing his story and helping people understand that children in foster care weren't statistics or charity cases, but complete human beings with dreams, talents, and love to give. He became a voice for kids who had felt invisible, helping adults see them clearly for the first time. At his new home with the Petersons, Alex had his own room with a big desk where he could write his stories. But his favorite spot was still the kitchen table, where he would read his latest tale to his new parents over breakfast, just like he used to do with Grandma Rose. "You know what, Alex?" Mr. Peterson said one morning as Alex finished reading a story about a boy who discovers that the best magic is the kind found in everyday love. "Your grandmother was right. Your words really do have magic in them." Alex smiled, touching the worn cover of his composition notebook. "She always said the best stories are the ones that help people feel less alone." "Well then," Catherine said, ruffling his hair affectionately, "you're definitely writing the best stories of all.